Welcome back to another episode of the Marketing Schematic. As per usual, you have me, Ann Cotter, and Chad Spotty in today's episode. With us as our special guest is Amanda King. So I'll give a quick bio to who you are. Amanda is a passionate brand builder with 15 years of marketing experience in manufacturing, food and beverage, retail, and automotive industries. Today, Amanda is the marketing manager for Yamato Corporation, a leading manufacturer in weighing equipment for food packaging. And one of the, I'm sure, many hats that you wear, Amanda, is in trade show strategy. So promotion and execution and all of that good stuff, which is what we're here to talk about today. And as I said to Amanda before we started recording, you are the first guest of this podcast that is not a top floor person. So we're very excited to have you. And welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Welcome.
I am
Yay.
very excited to be here, and I am honored to be the first.
Number one. I love
Yeah, number one.
Number one.
Exactly. Making headlines.
it.
Love it.
All right. So, like I said, for today's episode, we're going to be talking about trade show strategy, and we'll be picking your brain, Amanda, on things like manufacturing trade show trends, setting exhibit goals and kind of best practices, and then a little bit too about, booth design and figuring out layout and, whether you do that in-house or vet that through someone else, all of that kind of stuff.
Which we actually got to see we got to see the end result kind of firsthand too, didn't we?
Yeah, we met at a trade show in person.
Yeah.
That was that was our first time meeting. So that's kind
one of the benefits of trade shows.
Serendipitous. Yes,
There you go.
exactly. Point proven already.
Yes, for sure.
It works.
Yeah. Cool. So before we get into all of that good stuff, we are going to ask our standard icebreaker question. So Amanda has let us know that she is aware of what question we're about to ask. But to just review the context, Chad is always telling me to go travel since I work remote. I don't have kids or a mortgage or a dog. Yeah, which,
I'm surprised you don't have a dog.
I would love a dog. I have a cat, and she's kind of an only child cat. Whenever she goes to the other side, maybe I consider getting a dog.
What's the neighbor's dog that we can hear occasionally?
Yes, Remy. Remy lives next door. You probably won't hear him. Yeah, he's not my dog, but he lives close by. But because of all that, I'm taking travel recommendations. So what is one place you've been that you recommend? And what would you recommend doing there?
So my answer to your icebreaker question is Iceland.
Ooh,
you need to go to Iceland.
Okay.
Yes. Ooh. So Chad, have you been?
I have not.
And Anne, I'm assuming
I have not.
Okay. So Iceland is amazing. It's easy to get to. I took a direct flight from Chicago. I think it was like 6 or 7 hours. It wasn't bad.
Yeah. That's not bad.
No. And what's amazing about Iceland, obviously tourism is a big industry for them. So they have it down. I know a lot of people will go and rent a car, but we didn't do that. We actually did a lot of day trip excursions. And I think the beauty of going there is that you can chill in a geothermal spa in the morning, but then you can experience the city life of Reykjavik at night. So you get the best of both worlds.
Awesome.
I'm definitely I like to spend time outdoors, but I don't like to sleep outdoors. So, at Iceland, we went to the Blue Lagoon and a few other geothermal spas. We went hiking on a glacier. We went and saw the Northern Lights. Wow. We went to the Black Sand Beach. So we got so many different experiences while also staying in a wonderful hotel. Yeah. And it was great. And what's funny about Iceland is that I went in September of 2019. I had the trip booked before I got the job at Yamato. I started talking to Yamato in April of 2019. During the interview process, they're like, trade shows are a really big part of our business. They're super important. Our biggest event is going to be in Vegas in September. And I'm like, great, great, great. And didn't even like think until after I got the job. I was like, oh, I should look to see when that event is. So I don't have to like cancel my trip to Iceland or move it. Yeah. Thankfully, I didn't have to. But what happened is I went to our biggest event, our biggest trade show, Pack Expo in Las Vegas. I was home for less than 24 hours. After being in Vegas for about 10 days, was home for less than 24 hours before my flight down to Iceland. So what I did is I had my suitcase for Vegas packed. I had my suitcase for Iceland packed. And when I got home, I just put one in the closet, pulled the other one out. And it was kind of crazy. Like, I don't necessarily recommend it. I don't know if I would do it again, but like literally as soon as we landed, we got on a bus and went to the Blue Lagoon, and I just like coasted like post trade show chaos into the geothermal spot and relaxed. Yeah.
At least that was the order of it. It wasn't Iceland then trade show.
Yes, 1,000%. So anyways,
I don't think I have enough clothes to be able to do that. I think I would run out of clothes.
I would have to get another suitcase. For sure.
How long were you in Iceland for?
I was there for, funny you should ask, Chad. We were planning to be there, I think it was for like 6 days, and we actually got stuck there for an extra 2 days because I learned that Iceland is the third windiest country in the world. And somebody fact check that, maybe it's changed. But we went to the airport. I traveled with one of my best friends, and we're sitting at the gate. We were there early enough. We're always early. They hadn't even assigned the gate yet. As soon as the gate assignment went up, we're like, okay, well, let's head over there. And my friend says, I'm just shocked that we haven't run into any issues while we're traveling. And I looked at her and I said,
famous last words.
Don't say that.
Yeah. And then honestly, we're walking towards the gate and there's just like this group of people that's growing. And we're like, what's going on? And then over the intercom, you hear, all flights have been canceled. Please proceed back through customs to baggage claim and then head to your airline's desk. And we're like, what? Whoa. And so literally, I mean, talk about stranger danger. We were standing in line. They just started counting us off, putting us on buses. I don't even think that the bus drivers who were taking us to the different hotels for the overnight accommodations, because we were all stranded, I don't even think that some of them knew where they were going. So we blindly got onto a coach bus and thankfully ended up at a very nice hotel where we stayed for one night. Before we had to go back to the airport and do it all again. And then they put us in another hotel in downtown Reykjavik. So a lot of the extra 2 days that we got in Iceland were spent
panicking
in lines and panicking. But we made it back. We made it back, and it was a direct flight. So as soon as we got on that plane, we knew that we were good to go. So
wow. What's the weather like? Like, was it warm?
In September, it wasn't warm, but it wasn't cold either. So we were prepared for just layers, and I also had a tote bag and a carry-on suitcase, and that's it. Now, I don't know how I even managed to do that when I pack now, but we only took what we needed and dressed in layers. There was, I just remember being cold, but not too cold.
I mean, we're used to it. We're in Wisconsin.
100%. Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
So it was,
on us, for sure.
But it was amazing. Like the entire experience, it has everything, and it's a direct flight. So you got to go.
All right, Iceland.
It's been on my list for sure.
Good.
There's volcanoes there, right?
Yep.
Did you go to volcanoes? Okay.
Yep.
Yeah.
Cool. I mean, we did all of the things, and because they're so great at with tourism, we signed up for excursions, and we would just go and stand on a street corner, and they would there's a whole group, and it was they'd come by with their excursion vans, and they say, hey, we're here to pick up King and Altman, and we're like, oh, that's us, and we hopped on, and there was Wi-Fi on the vans and everything, so could even sprinkle in some work if you had to.
Awesome.
So yeah,
you would, Amanda.
yeah
I can't help it.
Oh my goodness, that's awesome.
Very
And I
cool.
like that you were able to weave in trade show somehow
Yeah.
into that. Very
That's a
cool.
pro. She's a pro.
She's a pro. Yeah.
Trade shows
Cool.
are just a
Well,
big part of my life.
they really are. I want to ask about that too, like how
Let's
many
talk
trade
about
shows
that.
you go to a year. But let's start with, tell us a little bit about you and Yamato. You can give your kind of elevator pitch for what you guys do over there.
So I oversee the marketing department at Yamato Corporation. The Yamato brand has been around for over 100 years. Our parent company is in Akashi, Japan. Yamato, that's Yamato Scale Company. Yamato Scale Company has subsidiaries around the world. Most people know us for our radial combination scales. Those are also referred to as multi-head weighers in the packaging industry. Those are integrated into food packaging lines. So our scales will weigh chips before they go into a bag, or leafy greens before it goes into a tray. So we're just one piece of the food packaging puzzle. But in addition to our combination scales, we offer industrial scales that weigh at higher target weights. So think like smoker pellets in like a 40-pound bag. We can help weigh and package those. We have tray filling solutions that work with our combination scales. We can do, like I'd mentioned, leafy greens into trays, but we can also do, if you buy like a salad kit and there's like that toppings kit at the top of a salad, we can weigh and fill those compartments, any kind of rigid or semi-rigid containers. We also offer check weighers. Check weighers are usually integrated the end of the line, and they will check weight. They can inspect products for contaminants like metal, for example. And then we also have our commercial scales that are in a lot of retail settings. So there's a lot of food chains that have our smaller scales in their kitchens, grocery chains as well. So you might be able to go to your local produce department in your wherever you shop and use one of our scales to weigh out whatever food you want to take home. But I would venture to guess that a lot of the food that is currently in your cabinets and pantry today was likely weighed on a Yamato scale. So in short, we weigh stuff, and as we like to say, we are always the best way to weigh.
I love that.
I love it.
Did you come up with that?
Actually, that messaging came from Japan.
I like it.
Wow,
so yeah, I saw it and adopted it, and then we kind of all agreed. I work regularly. I should mention that Yamato Corporation is the U.S. subsidiary of Yamato Scale Company, and Yamato Corporation is focused specifically on North, Central, and South America. So I have the privilege of working with other marketing managers around the world, specifically in Germany and the UK, and of course, Japan. And so always the best way to weigh, that's our kind of global brand messaging. And then we get more localized and regionally specific as appropriate.
Yeah, makes sense. It's funny, as you were talking about the salad kits, I was like, that's something I eat probably a couple times a week. And I'm just picturing it. I'm like, oh, now I know.
I do the grocery shopping for our house, and at least 6 to 10 bag salads, we call them, are on the order every week. So
I love it. Yeah. You know, I shop very different than I used to. I never, before I got into the packaging industry, never even considered how food was packaged, let alone weighed. And now my eyes are open to a whole different world. And when I walk through the grocery store, I go, is this our customer? They should be like, did we weigh this?
Let me call them up.
Did we weigh this? So a lot of people haven't maybe heard of Yamato, but you've certainly heard of the people who use our equipment.
Right.
Sure.
Yeah, totally.
So will you only shop and eat food that is a Yamato customer? Is that what you're saying?
No. I wish that should be the case.
Yeah.
It's funny because I think it was like a week ago, my daughter was asking me how do they know how many goldfish to put in the little like snack pack, open that up. And she was counting how many were in there. And she's like, do each one have the same amount, or how many do they know to put in there? And I was like, I think it's by weight. And I'm not even thinking of Yamato or, that kind of reference.
Yeah. That is exactly what we do. And I certainly hope now you can tell your daughter, let's just tell her that a Yamato scale weight that.
Yeah.
I cannot confirm, but
cannot confirm or deny.
But like she's spot
Pepperidge
on, and you're
Farm,
right
yeah.
too. It was packaged by weight. So
I love it.
She's smart. Does she need a job?
Yeah. I was just gonna say, wow, that's a very smart question for it. She's 5, right?
Yeah,
Oh,
I think she just wanted to make sure she was getting, the most for her
her
money
fair
and her
share.
goldfish. Right, exactly. She didn't want to get shorted on those
I love
goldfish in the
it.
bag.
I love it.
That's so funny.
I
Awesome.
think honestly, she was probably just making sure her and her brother had the same amount. I think that's really what it came down to.
Yeah, it's always a
And
competition.
Yamato made that happen, right?
Mhm,
Maybe.
mhm. Maybe. You can tell her that, though.
Yeah,
you can definitely
I'll tell her that for sure.
Amazing. I love it. Yes. So that is what we do. That is what you do.
Awesome. Very cool.
Awesome. Yeah. So then if you wouldn't mind just talking a little bit about kind of your role there, and then maybe a little more specifically your involvement in trade show strategy.
Sure. So my role as the marketing manager, I honestly oversee all aspects of marketing at Yamato Corporation. So we are a very small but mighty team. When I joined the company 4 years ago, it was actually just myself. And now I have a counterpart, and we are a dynamic team of 2. So when I joined Yamato, and I had mentioned this earlier in the interview process, they talked a lot about how important trade shows were for the industry. And what I think is so, it's kind of a full circle moment for me to be talking to you guys, because I saw when I joined, trade shows are very important, especially in the manufacturing industry, but the business had previously neglected all aspects of digital marketing. And so I had to kind of educate my leadership team on the importance and value of integrating digital marketing into their plan, into our plan, I should say. So now I create and oversee the entire marketing plan and all aspects of it. So I obviously was able to educate my colleagues on the importance of digital marketing, and now I oversee that with the help of Top Floor, which is fantastic and has been wildly beneficial, while also overseeing the more traditional marketing tactics that we do, like trade shows.
Sure.
So,
and you were not paid to say that.
Absolutely not. Right. Absolutely not. No, it's but really, I think that it's a wonderful thing, because I think especially for marketing professionals in the manufacturing industry, a more comprehensive marketing approach that incorporates digital and still more traditional aspects like trade shows really is a recipe for success. And, Yamato Corporation, when I joined, was a little too trade show heavy. I had to kind of explain that marketing's more than just trade shows and trinkets. There's a whole nother world that we have to get involved in to build brand awareness and generate leads. And yeah, it's just, but finding that right balance, it's going to look a little bit different depending on every company and what their budget is and how their team is structured. But I really do think that, even with with your focus being on digital, there still is, I think, as you guys recognize, a benefit to participating in trade shows.
Yes.
Yeah. And one
absolutely.
of the things that always kind of, blows my mind a little bit is, so trade shows are expensive, right? Like, especially when Yamato's going to a trade show. I can only imagine when you guys are setting up the full conveyor and getting all the scales and the amount of people that you have there and the booth size and all that sort of stuff. It adds up pretty quick. Just being able to support that and maximize what you're getting out of that trade show with digital marketing, the digital marketing aspect of supporting that specific event is a drop in the bucket compared to what that event is costing you as a whole.
That's very true.
Of the things where it's like,
I mean, trade shows, wonderful world of trade shows, so many great things about it. But one of the, difficult things to swallow sometimes is the cost. Like, you're absolutely right that they are very, very expensive. And, we're just continuing to see trade show costs go up and up and up and up. And so, that doesn't, just because the trade show expenses are increasing, that doesn't mean that the budget's going to increase. So that is
Sure.
kind of a challenge that people often face. I think, I mean, I find myself in the same situation where it's like, well, we have to figure out, we have to get creative on how we're going to do more with more activity. But yeah, with less money. And I do think at the same time, though, during COVID, I applaud all of the organizations who attempted to take their trade shows online.
Virtual,
and I also, I applaud all of the marketing managers, myself included, where I'm like, oh, I'm going to populate my virtual trade show. And these are going to be the graphics. And we'll use these digital assets to create this experience. And everybody's going to be sitting at home and they're going to join us. I mean, COVID taught us that there is no replacement for the in-person value that trade shows provide.
Right.
And when it comes to shows, where else are you going to have the opportunity to have so many potential customers in one place under one roof at the same time? You can't replicate it. And I think that COVID confirmed that for everybody, which is why you still, even after COVID, I don't even think that we've kind of gotten back to what we were at pre-COVID. But people still see the value and are jumping back in to get trade shows back in their marketing plans, back on their schedules, and they're willing to make the investment despite the increasing costs while still being mindful and trying to be as creative as possible to make their money go as far as you can. And marketing comes into that for sure.
Ann and I were literally just talking about this yesterday when we were at lunch, and the idea, and especially for our clients and the types of clients we work with for manufacturers, you're not selling something that's a commodity or a one-off thing. I mean, this is a capital expenditure. It's a big piece of equipment that's costing, it's $100,000, $1 million, whatever the number is. You're not just going to get someone to come and buy that online or on an online, on your website. It's probably not going to happen. There's a sales cycle. There's all kinds of stuff that needs to happen. And a big part of that is meeting the people that you're going to be, working with on the setup of that equipment, on the maintenance of that equipment. All that sort of stuff goes into it. And that's only going to happen at a trade show or some sort of on-site type of visit.
Well, I often think, when it comes to trade shows are the only place where people are actually going to physically be able to touch and interact your equipment, assuming that you take it. But, you can see on a website, I can say we have an intuitive user interface. On our video, we can show the HMI screen and say intuitive user interface. And that's great. But where else can, a potential end user come to actually validate that we actually do have an intuitive user interface? Because at the show, on the show floor, they're able to interact with the equipment. So, you can engage a lot of the senses through digital efforts. But really, when it comes to the, touch, or if you have a food product or beverage, I suppose taste comes into effect too. You're really only going to get that at a show, or if you have people come to your facility for an open house or a demo. But the easiest place to do that by far is at a trade show.
And that grocery store owner, facilities manager of the grocery company or whatever, they can come to that trade show and not only see your Yamato scale, but that's not the only thing that's going to go into their building to make the whole process work. And that was one of the things that, seeing you at the trade show, once we saw and kind of got to get a feel for your product, your equipment, and see how it worked, walking around, we saw other people who were manufacturing other pieces of that supply chain with a Yamato scale on top in their booth. So and they can see the whole picture, and kind of get to see how it all works together.
That's,
that's not going to happen anywhere else, right?
Exactly. You're absolutely right.
You can't recreate that digitally.
No, you got multiple companies' products all set up, to take it from end to end.
You can and you should complement it with digital efforts, but you guys are absolutely right. It's in person. And I think, if memory serves, even though we had been working together for several years, the first place that we met was at the trade show. And that was probably the first time that you actually got to see our equipment up close and personal. And
me for sure. Yep.
Yeah. And it's, Chad, you're right. It's one piece of a full packaging line. And we have people from food processing facilities or, a corporate headquarters of a, for a company or a brand who are on the show floor. And that for some is the first time that they're seeing our equipment in person. And we cannot replicate that digitally.
Right. Absolutely. So at a very high level, what are some of the outcomes that you look for when exhibiting? What does success look like to you?
The short answer to that would be number of leads captured at an event and then how many sales can be attributed to the event. But our sales cycle is a little bit complicated. And so, that's probably the simple, like black and white answer. But there are so many other things I think to take into consideration for what makes a trade show a success. There's also a lot of factors that can play into whether or not a show is going to be a success, starting with the location, right? Like, if a show's in Orlando, will people be inclined to go there because they can tack on a trip to Disney World versus a show that might be the next year in, I don't know, Nebraska? Like, do you want to go to Orlando or do you want to go to Omaha, right? Like that might affect attendance at a show, which is ultimately going to affect our numbers at the show. Booth location can affect, your visibility within, and can contribute to success. We always try to, depending on the size of of our booth at a show, at least try to be, if we're on an inline booth, on a corner, just for maximum visibility. But for some, or really for everybody, it's challenging to stand out. So your booth placement or your location in a hall can impact whether or not your event is quote unquote successful. The weather can affect that. COVID can affect that.
Yeah. It's kind of like, sorry, go ahead.
No. So, there's just so many factors that can contribute to,
like the quality and the frequency of the people that are showing up.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
Kind of.
But we're always looking at, and we always hope that we have more leads than the year before. And we hope that we can attribute more sales to the event than the year before. But for us, at least in the packaging industry and being a manufacturer of large capital equipment, there's people's budgets can affect whether or not they're willing to buy. Sometimes the budgets affect whether or not they're even sent to the show. A company might choose not to send someone to attend a show because they're trying to cut back on expenses because of how they're doing, right? Like, so there's so many moving pieces where, you can simplify it down to, did we get more leads and did we get more sales? But I also think that it's important to take into consideration all of the other factors that can impact your success at the event.
And a lot of those are things that are kind of, some of them are outside of your control in a way too.
Yeah.
So deciding what's in your control that maybe you have some say in where your booth is located, but you're not going to get a say with the weather.
Right. Yeah. But I also think it's interesting, something that I always keep in mind is when it comes to the quote unquote success of a show, there are also so many different individuals who are coming into our booth who are at different stages in the sales cycle. So you may be talking to someone who is brand new to the industry, who has no idea what your brand is or your product is or how it works. You might also have simultaneously in a conference room, a meeting happening with a group of, with a full project team from a potential customer who's ready to sign on an order and close, a $500,000 deal. And maybe that started because of the initial conversation that we had with them at the trade show last year. Then you also have people who are simply just there to research, and they're, just creeping by to kind of check you guys out as they go from our booth to our competitor's booth, just to keep things high level, because maybe they're not ready to talk about us. So there's so many different types of individuals. I think, like, I actually was thinking about in your episode about how you use personas when building a website. Like, same thing applies. Like, you have so many different personas that you have to take into consideration when you're planning for a trade show booth, different demographics, different job titles, and then layer in what phase they're in, where they are in the sales cycle. And you kind of have to come up with a trade show booth and experience that caters to all of those individuals and all of their needs.
Oh, literally, I've never thought of it that way. That makes so much sense, though.
But also, how many people have done the work that you guys do from a digital aspect? Just apply it to your trade show aspect, or vice versa, right? Like,
that's so. Yeah. I'm just thinking too about those passerbys, like you said, who aren't necessarily committed, but they're just kind of weighing their options. I had to make
Love
that
one. Keep them coming.
It's like, how do you like measure that? Like, can you measure like impressions? I'm like thinking digitally, like,
well, the shows are always going to, in their exhibitor prospectus, so to encourage people to sign up and exhibit, there's going to be information about number of attendees and like basic demographic information. So you could probably, using that as a baseline, maybe make some general assumptions to how many impressions you make. And then after the fact, they're going to give numbers to about total number of attendees and everything like that. So you certainly can use that data that you might not have captured yourself physically in your booth, but you certainly
the size of the audience, the total audience.
Absolutely. And, every show kind of does it a little bit differently, but when it comes to our general approach, we're capturing leads through the show provided, we pay for it, but whoever they're partnered with for their lead retrieval app. So we do all of that digitally so people can use their phones to scan badges. And then we do a custom survey with different qualifiers so that our sales team can capture the information that they need right there in the booth for the individual on their phone. And then that gets shared with them after the fact. Yeah, I am shocked when I see people not utilizing the show, the apps, unless they have their own, of course, but like not taking a more digital approach to the lead retrieval aspect. I think that there are some people in the packaging industry in particular who still do kind of just like a handwritten form, and then it's like data entry, and it's so much quicker and faster when it's in the palm of your hand. And I think then that helps after the fact in the sales follow-up process, but also it frees people up in the booth to focus more on conversations and building relationships, which capitalize on that opportunity, because again, it's that face-to-face interaction that you only get at trade shows. And I think it really just kind of helps expedite the process. So internally here at Yamato Corporation, we try every single show. We like to meet with our sales team to review what questions we're asking. And my biggest question to them is, what can we do to help expedite the process for you? Because we really want our salespeople to talk to as many people as possible. And that way then, even for some of the people who are just the passerbys, you can scan their badge and just say they're just looking, but you still get their information. And that's a huge opportunity, and definitely.
And you can worry about them later, because for the trade show, it's just like focusing on the here and the now, who wants to engage.
Yep. But you bring up a good point with like the here and now aspect. Like also when it comes to just any of our days in the office, any individual when they go to work is surrounded by distractions, to-do lists,
Mm-hmm.
coworkers, if they work from home, kids, calls. It's you're being bombarded by distractions when
Right.
you like, but at a trade show, you know, where else are you going to get somebody away from their computer? Like
Right.
they are
Right.
there to be at the show, but then you
Mm-hmm.
have the challenge of great, they're there, but do they know that you're there? And how are you going to break through the noise?
Mm-hmm.
Because once they're in the building, all of those exhibitors, we're all there with the
Mm-hmm.
same hope and intention, is to get their attention, get them to come to our
Mm-hmm.
booth, get them to come and talk to us. And so that is something that it's a different challenge, but I still do feel like there's less distractions,
Yeah.
which is a huge
And
benefit.
there's a much higher intent there too.
Right.
So
Yeah.
yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
yes, for sure.
They're
Cool.
coming at the very least to look around at what you have.
Mhm.
Like
The very
maybe,
least.
Mhm.
Yeah.
at the very least.
Yeah, totally. So I want to talk a little bit about kind of like planning and tactics if you have them. So, um, I guess at a very high level, what are some of like the key stages of planning or executing your trade show exhibit?
Well, the first one, obviously signing up the show, but first and foremost, it's going to be booth selection. And some of
Mhm.
that, like you want to be as strategic as possible when you're selecting your booth.
Mhm.
What's available is going to be dependent on your size. Like for Yamato Corporation, for some of the shows that we go to where we have a much larger booth, we don't get to dictate when we get to pick it in like the order. And
Mhm.
often, we're not high up on the list where we get a premium
Mhm.
spot. And there's a lot of factors that can play into when you get to select your booth space. So, first and foremost, locking in that booth space. And then from there, you can start to think about, okay, this is the type of layout that we have in our world. What equipment do we want to show? Now,
Hmm.
you have
Mhm.
to keep in mind, too, that when we're signing up for these shows, like, and I think that this is common for most companies. Maybe it's not, but we're planning these shows over a year in advance. If you
Hmm.
want a
Wow.
premium
Yeah.
spot, and in our world, if we have, great, we're registered, we're an exhibitor, we have our booth space, and now the conversation is, what equipment do we want to show? Do we have any new
Mhm.
products? And we're talking about this over a year in advance, also because we need to get our
Mhm.
equipment ordered,
Right.
and
Mhm.
like we have and that kind of kicks everything else off then. And then
Sure.
once we get access to the exhibitor portal, it's, what are we going to say in our profile? Who's going to go to the show? Where are we staying? What are we going to wear?
Mhm.
It's all of those little details that then fall into
Mhm.
place. And I think that trade shows are so fascinating to me because the list of things that need to be done, there's thousands of items on that list in order to
Mhm.
have a successful event, and yet somehow you always end up getting there, and there's always this like
Mhm.
overwhelming sense of like it's never going to come together, and then it always does.
Mhm.
So
Somehow it just works out.
yes, but like you look at the list and you're just like, oh my gosh. But from a planning purpose, just to like keep us organized, we do have like our internal document for the different
Mhm.
I don't know if we would call them phases, but just kind of broken out into the different categories of all the things that need to be done so that we can get
Mhm.
from booth selection to now we're standing in front of the booth at the show itself and the doors are open
Mhm.
and it's time to rock and roll. The stage
Yeah.
How
has been set. Sales
are
can
Yeah.
you
do it.
changing? Are you changing like the booth design is the right word, but booth design or booth layout from a show to show basis or from a like yearly basis, or how often do
Mhm.
you like reevaluate what you're going to that show with, or is it different for every show?
Um, it's a little different for every show, at least our
Okay.
approach. So at Yamato Corporation, so for North, Central, and South America, our office plans usually about 8 to 10 trade shows a year.
Okay.
And Yamato globally probably has maybe 40. So there's
Okay.
other subsidiaries that are planning events. Um, Speaking specifically for the Americas, we go to a few general industry shows. So in my world, Pack Expo is the main event that we go to every year just for general packaging purposes. And then all of the other shows that we go to are a little bit more application specific.
Okay.
And when I say application, I mean like product or market specific. So like we'll go to a seafood show. We used to go to a pizza show.
Sure.
We'll go to a produce show, several actually, a cannabis show. Like those are for the specific types of products that we can weigh.
Sure.
So, and our booth size and our approach to the booth is going to be a little bit different depending on the show. So for us, Pack Expo is our largest event of the year.
Which is coming up, right?
Yep, it's coming up in September. This year it's in Las Vegas. It jumps between Vegas and Chicago.
Okay.
But that is our largest event of the year. And we work with an exhibit house to help us design and build our booth experience for that show. And then we've, for all of our other shows, we've actually standardized most of those shows. Actually, all of them this year are inline booths. We like to be on a corner, but a 10 by 30 booth space. And we kind of take more of a, I'll say DIY approach. They're still very professional, but we are able to provide or rent from the show itself all of the items that we need for those events. But in doing so, we're able to put more of our budget towards Pack Expo to work with our exhibit house to do a custom booth for our main event every year.
Okay, got it.
So that's just how we do it. It's not how we've always done it, but it's how I want to do it. And I think that there's efficiencies to be gained. And it's so far worked out well for us. So I think that will continue.
So knowing that Pack Expo is like a month away, right? September, mid-September. Like what phase are you in for that show right now?
The try not to freak out.
Panic and run.
No. That's good. And we're in the final phases. In fact, we have our pre-show meeting with our sales team tomorrow to go through everything for the event. So in that includes information on where we're staying, then all the booth details, like where we're located, what equipment's going to be showcased. We'll go through like training for all of that. So we're really kind of in like, we're over the hill and we're coasting down now to the event itself. I mean, it's interesting because we're in like that with trade shows. I feel like there's a weird lull period where it's like, okay, we're good for now until you get to the event and then actually build the booth itself. And it's always fascinating to me how when you arrive at a convention center or an exhibit hall and you're like, oh my gosh, this place is a mess. This is chaos. And then by the time the doors open, you're like, it's beautiful. How did we get here? Yes. And then literally like 10 minutes after the doors close, it's just chaos again. And it's just, people are pulling things down and carpets being rolled up. The entire industry is truly fascinating to me, how people can build these different booth structures and create these experiences. And we all spend this money for like 3 or 4 days. I mean, most of our shows are 3. It's pretty wild.
Yeah, that's crazy. I want to jump back a little bit because I thought it was interesting how one of your first points was just like standing out and like cutting through the noise, just being a really big part of this. And I kind of identify to that as like one of your very first steps in the planning process is figuring out like where you are in the show and your layout, which I think has a lot to do with how you stand out.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So my question is just kind of around like best practices when it comes to booth layout or design. What other things do you factor into that? All of that kind of stuff.
For me personally, I think about 3 things when it comes to booth design, more so layout. I can talk about the layout separately, but a strong booth design, you need to have strong branding, stronger messaging, and movement. So when I'm walking around a trade show and even when I put myself in an attendee's shoes, I don't think that any marketer, when it comes to their trade show experience, should assume that anybody has any idea who you are. Like there are very few brands, especially in the packaging industry, in my world in particular, that like have a logo or an icon that can or should stand alone. And so you obviously need to have strong branding. And when I say strong branding, I like, you likely won't have logo recognition, but when for me strong branding is consistent branding, in the sense that your trade show experience needs, if I go to your website, if your call to action is driving me to your site, I want to make sure that I know that I'm in the exact same place. It should have similar messaging, a similar look and feel, similar colors, similar style. I mean, at the end of the day, your trade show booth is your brand brought to life. And so strong branding, first and foremost, you have to have that. And you have to think through that when you're putting together your booth design. Stronger messaging. So I think I just mentioned that most companies there are very few brands in the world that can just have an icon or a logo and you know exactly what they do. I cannot tell you how many times I walk around a trade show. In fact, I was at Interpack back in May. Interpack is the largest packaging show in the world. It happens every 3 years in Dusseldorf, Germany. The location that Interpack is at has 18 different buildings. Walking through all of those, I saw so many different booths but not very few had strong messaging, where as somebody who works in the industry and I'm walking around, I'm going, I have no idea what that piece of equipment is or what it does. Like, tell me, like, assume when you are approaching your booth design, assume that nobody has any idea who you are, and come up with messaging that very clearly explains what you do.
Yeah.
And, so with that, strong branding, stronger messaging, and then movement is what I always keep in mind when doing the booth design, because when someone's walking through a trade show, you are just bombarded with visuals, right? It's like sensory overload. You don't know where to look. Like, how are you going to possibly capture someone's attention in 0.2 seconds and have them think, oh, I need to go talk to those people because I have a need that they're going to be able to help me with. And so, I think back to Interpack, and like there was a brand that had messaging like, your reliable partner. And I'm like, great, I'm looking for a reliable partner. Like, am I going to walk in there and say, will you marry me? Like, that's not a reliable partner that they're talking about. So like, it's just very important to be very mindful in your booth design, what your messaging is. Tell me in 6 words or less.
Spell it out for them. Yeah.
Yep. Like, it can't hurt anything. And then with movement, I think that just attracting the eye and attracting somebody's attention so that they can see your logo and then read your strong messaging so that they know who you are and what you do. Like, that is like the first, like, those are the basics, and then you'll be successful. When it comes to movement, you can do that through, at Interpack, I saw a lot of use of digital, like LED screens set up almost as like digital billboards with moving messaging, simple messaging, that's both, like, combine it all together, or use of lights to lead the eye, or I saw some use of like lighting on the floor so that as so many people are looking up, but like you can draw their attention down to the floor. So there's like a lot of little tricks like that. But I also think that when it comes to your trade show design, like, it's the details that make the difference. And sure, you can throw up your logo and plap a machine down and be good to go. That's fine. But if you really want to maximize the investment that you're making, the large investment that you're already making to be at the show, I think keeping those 3 things in mind, and giving them a little bit of time and attention will help anyone be a little bit more successful.
Yeah. It's so interesting to think about, like, there's a lot of crossover between like traditional marketing and trade shows. So digital marketing, I'm thinking a lot of the same principles you're describing are like sensory overload. You're on your phone, and like, how do you look at one ad for more than like 0.25 seconds? Like, it's the same kind of thing. And you have to find those weird little tricks, or like in the digital world, maybe it's a GIF, maybe it's a video, like whatever it is, to like make them pause. So I just think that's interesting how much crossover there
Yeah,
is in a
for
way.
sure. I
Mm-hmm.
never, it's still in my head from when you were talking about the user journey mapping and how you could apply that to like a trade show. Like
Mm-hmm.
that never crossed my mind before. And that, I don't know,
Mm-hmm.
that's awesome. Like you could
Yeah.
definitely utilize a lot of the same things that go into building a
Absolutely.
website or a successful
Mm-hmm.
marketing campaign and doing the same
Yeah.
stuff when you're planning a trade show.
When it comes
Yeah.
to like a successful trade show event, I mean, or really any, like, what an opportunity to integrate at a trade
Mm-hmm.
show, like all of your digital marketing efforts. So
Mm-hmm.
you can use digital to promote that you're going to be at the show. You can utilize
Mm-hmm.
digital assets within the booth experience. You can drive people to your website. I mean, I also, when it comes specifically to booth layout, I think it's important to keep in mind, to your point, Chad, about the different personas, like your layout should accommodate all of the different phases that somebody may be in the sales cycle. So,
Yeah.
for
Mm-hmm.
example, for the individuals who are just researching, super high level, may not even want to have their badge scanned, we have iPads on the exterior of our or the perimeter of our booth that are going to enable people to scan a QR code to take them to our website so that they can then
Mm-hmm.
continue to do a little bit more research, but at least we're directing them to the right location because they are a little more hands off. They're really not interested.
Yeah.
Then
Then
you
they
have,
can get that information on their
right,
own
yes,
without
and
having
come
to
to
be
us
engaged.
on their own time. But that's
Right.
great. And
Mm-hmm.
to your point, Anne, that would be, a positive impression. So that's a
Mm-hmm.
success in my mind.
Right. Yeah.
And then, let's think about somebody who, okay, they've done the research and they want to look at the equipment in person for us and our main competitor. Come on in. We're going to walk you here. You can talk to salesperson, ask all your questions, interact, touch and feel the product. Great. We checked and satisfied their needs. We got their information. We're going to be in touch.
Mm-hmm.
Then you need to make sure that your layout accommodates for maybe impromptu meetings. Maybe something came up where you have an existing customer who has a service related problem and they're just dying to get the details. And so it's like, okay, well, we're not going to crowd around this piece of equipment. Let's go sit down in these lounge chairs and have a casual conversation.
Mm-hmm.
Or then you have a conference room where more formal meetings are going to happen because people might bring, their executive leadership team to meet with
Mm-hmm.
ours to talk about a large order or, so it's taking into consideration too all of those different phases and providing the correct layout in that sense to
Mm-hmm.
create the best experience possible. And I
Yeah.
always like to focus on, a trade show is an event, but how do you take it from an event to an experience?
Mm-hmm.
So, taking the three factors in when you're building the booth design, the strong branding, stronger messaging, movement, and then the layout needs to accommodate all of those different stages that someone may be
Mm-hmm.
in the sales cycle.
Yeah. Is this making you think about websites, Chad?
It is.
Me too. Yeah,
Everything
I think
does.
there's so many just like core marketing principles that, whether you apply it to a trade show or a website or something else, it's kind of the same foundational knowledge that you have to be successful. It's just in different avenues, I
Yeah,
guess. Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
just applied a
Mm-hmm.
little bit differently,
Right.
Mm-hmm.
executed
Absolutely.
a little bit differently. But yes, the basics are the foundation is very much the same.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool. I want to cover a little bit just the topic of avoiding failure or mistakes. And you've been doing this for a long time. What are some things or something you would say to a person who's new to trade shows or exhibiting? What advice would you give them for avoiding pitfalls?
I would tell them to be aware of deadlines and read the show rules. So nobody
Mhm.
wants to spend the time to read the fine print, but you learn the hard way if you
Mhm.
break a show rule. So something as simple as like knowing the height, the maximum
Mhm.
height of the equipment or what your booth structure can be based on your booth layout. Like it's something that's so simple, but one of the shows that we go to, I think that so it's for the cannabis industry, and I think that most of the companies who are in cannabis, just because it's a newer and ever evolving industry, especially here in the States in recent years, we walked into a show and we were just in a 10 by 30 inline booth at the end. But I looked down towards the middle of the aisle and you're like, oh, people tried to get creative and they invested in this like rainforest themed like structure that was probably 12 feet higher than what it should have been. And it's
Oh
like,
no.
you know, if only we could all do that. Like, do y'all really think that like we don't want to have something that's like we're going to walk in and immediately see you? Like the rules exist for a reason, and I would
Yeah.
say like truly like there are exhibitor kits that are put together. So for somebody who's doing this for the first time, it's actually note the deadlines and thoroughly review the exhibitor kit to know the
Mm-hmm.
show rules.
Mm-hmm.
And like they that has all of the information that you really need and you need to be mindful of. And you can save yourself a lot of money if you hit a discount deadline. If you miss a discount deadline for something like services, for example, you're going to have to pay a lot more.
Mm-hmm. It's a lot to keep track of. I mean, we're exhibiting in a trade show early October, and this is my first time, helping kind of plan it. So I'm just absorbing so much information from you right now. But one of the things that I'm just noticing right away is like you get so many emails from the we're at State Fair this year, so it's like you get so many emails from them about important dates and deadlines or
Yep.
advertisements and things like that, and it's a lot to keep track of. So that I think is a really good rule of thumb to just keep track of those deadlines, write them down, keep them in a place that you know where you'll see them
Mm-hmm.
and stay on top of it. Yeah.
It sounds simple,
Mm-hmm.
but for someone starting out, if they're going to focus on anything, and I guess I would
Mm-hmm.
also say, like, when it comes to trade shows, something is always going to go wrong. So
Mm-hmm.
you just
Just
have to,
expect it. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, just
expect
roll with
it
it.
and accept it. And, certainly plan and prepare as much as possible. I like to
Mm-hmm.
do that because then maybe you'll get lucky and whatever fires pop up really aren't that bad. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but it's going to happen. So, like,
Mm-hmm.
there's you just have to kind of go in mentally prepared that it can't
Things
be
could go
perfect.
wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah. What about like you had mentioned working with an exhibit house or
Mhm.
things that you would do internally? Like, do
Yep.
you have any advice there about kind of when to maybe offload something or like how to work with exhibit houses?
Yeah. So
Mhm.
from my experience, I think that like the booth size kind of dictates whether or not we need to work with an exhibit house. Um, with our larger shows, our exhibit house, they are the experts in the design and this is their trade. Like the
Mhm.
expectation is that they're going to craft a physical booth structure that is as best as it possibly can be.
Mhm.
Um, and I that's their world. But when it comes to the branding and the messaging and the products, that's on us from on the client
Mhm.
side, right? But the same thing applies when it comes to working with a digital agency for digital
Mhm.
efforts too. You guys are the experts and like teach me about GA4. I have no
Mhm.
idea, and I'll teach you guys about combination scales, right? Like
Right,
Mhm.
right.
it's the same like thought process where it's very much a partnership. Um,
Mhm.
and when it comes to offloading, I don't think you can necessarily like completely offload anything. Like the key to
Right.
success, especially when working with an exhibit house, is collaboration.
Mhm.
And I just try to be like mindful and focused on what's best for Yamato and our products being represented properly and is our branding correct. And then they offer their expertise in, have you considered showcasing your equipment in more of a like retail merchandise setup? Like maybe it's on a different shelving style, or maybe we create a walking path to encourage people to come into their booth. Like again, all of these little details that I would never think of.
Right.
But that's also, that's the value that they're adding. So,
Right.
and that kind of comes with when we have 2,500 square feet of space that we are going to fill, and we really want to create, we want to take the event from a basic event to an experience. That's where we engage with the
Mhm.
exhibit house and they can add value. And then when it comes to something like a 10 by 30 booth space where we're shipping our equipment and it's going to take up most of the floor space, like you can only get so creative in
Right.
those situations. So
Yeah.
did that
That's
answer your
awesome.
question?
Yeah, it definitely did. I'm again just going back to just kind of like the vendor relationship and whether it's a website or whether it's a trade show booth, you just need to have someone with that expertise and you can't do it all. And this is helping me kind of understand. Like I was totally blown away by your booth at the Pack Expo last year in Chicago. And now I'm like, okay, this is how it all came to life. This is how it all came together. Because I was like, how does Amanda do all this?
Yeah, right.
Well, I don't do it alone. Carolyn
Yeah.
helps. She's a huge help. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's at one point I did it all alone and it was a little chaotic and it was a lot. So there's a lot of moving pieces, but you know, when you have strong partners, I mean that we are a small but mighty team here, which is why we have to align ourselves with the best external agencies and teams that we possibly can. And so otherwise, you know, it's not possible to do it 100% on your own. I don't think that I could. I have put together booth structures myself, but for like a Pack Expo, I do not possess the skill set to like.
It's a big one. Yeah.
Too big. Too big. So.
Yeah. Yeah. I didn't ask this earlier, but how many trade shows does Yamato attend every year?
We go to, it depends on the year, like 8 to 10. It depends. So, yeah,
to me, that's a lot.
There are some, and like that's also not taking into account like the smaller like regional sales events that we may go to. In fact, I think that's something that we'll do more of in the future. But even then, the same rules apply. It doesn't really matter if it's a 10 by 10, you know, pop up little booth at a regional show or it's the, you know, large Pack Expo experience. It still requires a lot of effort and time and planning and coordination and consideration. So you're not just, you know, here's our pop-up banner with our logo on it and a piece of equipment and people walk by and they go, never heard of you, don't know what you do. Like you still have to give it the same like time and attention and proper consideration if you want it to be worthwhile.
Yeah. And I think knowing too, like where to invest the most time, obviously you're going to invest the most time in Pack Expo or those bigger shows, but maybe there's some repeatable aspects for the smaller shows.
Yeah. So, I also think that comes with time too. Like the longer that I've been with Yamato and the more I understand the industry, the more opportunities that I see for how we can reuse or repurpose or integrate things too. I mean, there is a learning curve. Not just from coordinating trade shows, but how to maximize them. That really just comes with experience, unless you're aligning and have, you know, a manager or a mentor who can offer that right away. But like when it comes to shows, you know, every single Pack Expo, for example, I just want it to be better than the year before. And we hope that that's more leads. We hope that that's more sales. But for me, from a marketing perspective, I want the experience to be better. I want the booth to be more aesthetically attractive and on brand. I want the messaging to be stronger. I want to integrate the digital assets that we have in our website more. And I just want to continue to raise the bar. And I see things as I go through. And to be honest, we're already planning Pack Expo 2024 in Chicago. So we're recording this now. I haven't even gone to Vegas, but I hope that I'm going to assume you guys aren't going to come to Vegas. But if you want to come back to Chicago in 2024, like the wheels are already spinning. I already have modifications to how we're going to make that booth bigger, badder, bolder than what we're doing in Vegas this year. And you just have to continue to build on it. But that just comes with time and experience.
That is awesome. I have learned so much from you in this episode, Amanda. I feel like we could talk about this for a really long time, but I want to be conscious of everyone's time. But maybe in a separate episode, we could do like digital marketing promotion for trade shows. Because I feel like we could spend another hour just talking about that because I have so many questions there too. But yeah, I think one of my biggest takeaways from just you being here is just listening to like all the crossover that there is between marketing principles and then, like you said, trade shows, but also website ads, that kind of thing.
Yep.
But yeah, any other final thoughts? Oh yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
I mean, my only final thought is hopefully, like, I think that you're absolutely right. And if there are people who are listening now who feel like they're focused and they're great on all of their digital efforts, fantastic. Like, you probably know more than you think and will kill it planning a trade show. Like, and then the same is for the opposite, right? Like, maybe there's somebody who's listening right now who hopefully they learn something new, but if they're like, this is kind of everything that I already knew about trade shows, but I'm a little unsure about digital, like, you've got the solid foundation, and find a partner who can kind of help bring it all together, because it really is all connected.
Awesome advice.
Awesome.
Cool.
Yeah, love it.
Cool. I have a couple little announcements too. So go visit the Yamato booth at the PAC Expo, September 11th through the 13th, correct?
You got it.
In Las
Vegas.
In Las Vegas.
If you are listening before then and you're in the Vegas area, go stop by and visit their booth and say hi to Amanda while you're there. And then for anyone listening who is local to the Wisconsin or Milwaukee area, Amanda will also be a panelist for our upcoming roundtable on September 27th, which will be continuing the conversation around trade show strategy. So we're really excited to have you for that event as well. And yeah, that's pretty much all we have for today. So thank you so much again, Amanda, for joining.
You're welcome.
Awesome.
Yes.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
So much fun.
It was amazing.